Hello guys, today we'll be looking into IGCSE Economics Paper 2 and more specifically Section A. We'll be talking about how to tackle this specific section and any tips and tricks that will help you score well. So before we look into Section A, let's start with an overview of Paper 2. The total time allocated for Paper 2 is 2 hours 15 minutes, which actually sounds pretty long, but it's just the right amount of time given the total amount of questions in this paper. And the total marks for paper 2 is 90, and there are two sections in total, section A and section B. In section A, you're expected to answer all the questions, while in section B, 4 questions are given and you have to choose 3 to answer. Please don't answer all the 4 questions as you'll be wasting your time and no extra marks are given even if you answer them. For section A, a case study and 8 questions will be given, and the total marks for this section is 30, which is about 1/3 of the entire paper. Make sure to do all 8 questions and you can spend around 30 to 45 minutes here, but no more than 45 minutes as you'll be taking time out from section B. The time spent for each question in this section should be around the same as the marks given. So if the question is 4 marks, like this one, then it should be around 4 minutes. But obviously this is just the overall gist of it, and you can tweak it a little bit and maybe spend a little bit more time on some questions, but just remember to not go over 45 minutes like in general. However, you should definitely spend around 2 to 3 minutes just going through the case study and making sure you understand the content. Normally, I will underline some important keywords or information as I read along so that when I read the question later, I can quickly find a part of the case study with the keywords and then find the answer. So to give an example, we can read this extract.
Many firms in Cambridge operate in the education, healthcare, research and development, high-tech manufacturing industries. Cambridge firms' exports are highly knowledge-intensive, making them highly priced and price inelastic in demand. Increasing global incomes have also increased the demand for services such as education from Cambridge. The increase in the size of the education industry has the potential to reduce poverty. This is because a more educated labor force is able to earn higher wages and also have access to more information on health.
And then blah blah blah. So as you can see, when I was reading the extract, I actually underlined some important information or keywords that I may need to refer back to when I read the question later. So if we look at part C, identify 2 benefits of having highly knowledge-intensive exports. So firstly, whenever you read the question, you should always underline the important keywords in each question. So for this question, it would be identify, and then maybe benefits, and then highly knowledge intensive, so like knowledge intensive. So when you look back, you can see that we actually also underlined knowledge intensive, like here. So you will know that the answer is actually around this area, and then after you read the same sentence, you'll notice that the answer is highly priced and price inelastic in demand. So this is how underlining the keywords can actually help you later on when you answer the questions. Okay, so for section A, the first question will usually be a 1-mark calculation question, and you'll be able to find the answers from the table given in the case study. One thing to remember is the units. The mark schemes usually allow if they're omitted, but it's still better to include them to be safe. Then for part B, it will be a 2-mark identify question, and part C, also 2 marks, can be identify, state, or explain. Identify and state questions are quite straightforward, just find what the question wants from the case study. But explain questions can be a little bit more complicated, however, as it depends on what the question is asking, but usually you should just make sure that you're answering the question by explaining what's asked And then you can use the case study to come up with your answers as well, but since there's 2 marks, it shouldn't be too difficult. Part D is also an explain question, but 4 marks this time, so it will require more. For this, you can follow this format, which is point, explain, point, explain.
Your point should obviously answer the question, and your explanation should further back up your point.
Please remember that you should still be including information from the case study while you answer. Part E is usually a format explain, analyze, or graph question. For the graphs, you just need to draw the graph required and no further explanation is needed, but make sure you label the y and x axis, label each graph, and label any equilibriums. Usually only demand and supply graphs are asked, so make sure you are very familiar with them. Some example questions are also found in these years, so you can check them out. Part E analyze questions are normally more common,
but obviously make sure to practice all the different question types. With that said, you can just follow the same format as the format explain questions. Give a point, then explain, point, explain.
Sometimes format analyze questions will ask the relationship between 2 things. So for this one is government spending and GDP. And these things will usually be related to the table or graph given in the case study. So these type of questions can be 4 or 5 marks, depending on the paper, and can be in question E or question F. For these type of questions, they're actually very easy to gain marks from. First, state the relationship between the 2 things. It can be either positive or negative. For this question, government spending will increase with GDP, so the relationship is positive. Then state the trend where you literally just have to write as government spending increases, GDP will increase. So that's trend. The analysis of the relationship is explaining why the relationship between the 2 is positive or negative. And in this case, government spending and GDP have a positive relationship because the government can spend on improving education, which will improve productivity and in return increase GDP. Then you should state evidence from the graph or the table given. Usually giving evidence of the highest or lowest will be sufficient. And what I mean by this is that you can look for the year where government spending is highest, and it should also be the year where GDP is highest. This is how you give evidence in econs, and you don't actually have to say,
oh, the government spending was 78 billion and GDP was 314 billion in 2016, while it was like 86 billion and 372 billion in 2021.
Giving stats from the table or graph is not needed as the mark schemes don't actually use them. However, if you want to be extra safe, then you can obviously include them. No one's stopping you. After that, you should give an exception of something that does not fit the trend, and if possible, try to explain why it doesn't fit. Following this format will likely give you more than 4 marks already, so it should be quite easy to get the 4 marks. Part F will usually be a 5-mark question asking for the relationship between 2 things. This should be answered using the same format as the previous one, which is this one, but now it will earn you 5 marks. Besides that, they could also ask you to draw a demand and supply graph, like here. And for this type of questions, you should just follow the same format as shown previously, but now you have to include an explanation worth up to a mark. Sometimes the 5 marker could just be a pure analysis question, like this one. They will ask you to analyze how one thing affects another. For these type of questions, just write a point, explain it, write another point, and then explain it. So it's like this. To be on the safe side, I will normally further explain my points or write an additional point with an additional explanation to make sure I get all the marks. Because sometimes it's possible to get all 5 marks just from these two points. But whenever I do these kind of questions, I'll always go with the mindset that
It's always better to write more and get all the marks than write just the right amount and take the risk of maybe not maximizing all the marks that you would get.
Lastly, we have Part G and Part H, which are always the 6 mark discuss questions. The questions will usually ask whether or not something is something, and all you need to do to tackle this question is to first draw a table like this. Yes or no. Fill up each column with 1 point and 1 explanation first. Point, explain. Point, explain. Then write an additional point into any column you want and explain it. I like to put this in the form of a 2-to-1 ratio, where one column has 1 point and 1 explanation, while the other has 2 points and 2 explanations. And you can obviously choose whichever column you feel more comfortable with and choose that one to have 2 points. And obviously in the exam, you should be writing the answers in paragraph, but writing the key ideas in a table form as a part of your planning is highly encouraged. You don't even have to draw this table if you feel like it's going to take too much time. But the point is that you have to include both sides of the argument to get all the 6 marks. So you can't just write all 3 points in the yes column and expect to get all 6 marks. So to give an example, let's look at this question. Discuss whether or not firms in Cambridge will continue to grow. As always, we will underline the keywords discuss and grow. So we'll draw the table first, yes or no. So for the yes column, you should be writing down why firms in Cambridge will continue to grow with a point and explain. Point, explain. For the no column, write down why firms in Cambridge will not continue to grow. So now that you have at least 1 point and 1 explanation in each column, choose one column to write an additional point and an additional explanation. So you could choose this for example. Remember to include information from the case study as it will make your answering process so much easier. Anyways, that is it for section A of paper 2. I hope you guys understood, and if you don't, feel free to comment your questions down below and I'm more than happy to answer. Thank you for watching and see you guys for section B.